Hi everyone, and welcome to Learn and Chat. I'm Mario, and today we're going to explore the fascinating story of Major League Baseball, better known as MLB. Today, millions of people watch Major League Baseball in the United States, Latin America, Asia, and many other parts of the world. We know famous teams like the Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, and Giants. And we know legendary names like Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, and many others. But baseball did not begin with huge stadiums, television cameras, or players earning millions of dollars. Its story started much more simply. Over more than a century, baseball experienced incredible moments, historic players, social changes, scandals, new technology, and international expansion. And today, in 2026, the game continues to evolve. So, how did baseball become one of the most famous sports in the world?
To understand Major League Baseball, we first need to understand where professional baseball came from. During the 1800s, different forms of baseball were already being played in the United States. At first, many teams were amateur clubs. Players participated because they enjoyed the game, not because baseball was their full-time job. But that began to change. In 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings became famous as the first openly professional baseball team. Their players were paid to play baseball. This was a major change. Baseball was becoming more than a recreational activity. It was becoming a business. Then, in 1876, the National League was created. It introduced a more organized professional competition between clubs. But the baseball world was still developing. Different leagues appeared, teams changed cities, and organizations competed for players and fans. Then, at the beginning of the 20th century, another powerful league entered the story.
And this is where one of baseball's greatest traditions begins. In 1903, the champions of the American League and the National League finally met to decide which team was the best. The Boston Americans, who later became the Red Sox, faced the Pittsburgh Pirates. This first modern World Series was different from the one we know today. It was a best-of-9 series, meaning the first team to win 5 games became champion. Pittsburgh started strongly, but Boston came back and won the series, 5-3. Fans loved the idea. For the first time, the champions of the two major leagues could meet on the field for one final battle. There was no World Series in 1904, but it returned in 1905 and soon became baseball's great annual championship tradition. And as baseball entered a new century, the sport was ready for its first true superstars. One of them would completely change the game. His name was Babe Ruth.
His real name was George Herman Ruth, but the world would know him as Babe Ruth. And interestingly, Ruth did not begin his major league career as a famous home run hitter. He began as a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, and he was excellent. But Ruth could also hit the ball with incredible power. In 1919, he hit 29 home runs, setting a new major league record. Then everything changed. Boston sold Ruth to the New York Yankees before the 1920 season. With New York, Ruth became a phenomenon. He hit 54 home runs in 1920, then 59 in 1921, and in 1927, he reached an incredible 60 home runs in one season. Fans came to stadiums just to watch him hit. By the end of his career, Ruth had 714 home runs. But Ruth did more than break records. He helped transform baseball into a national entertainment. And while Ruth was becoming an American icon,
there was another side of baseball history that could not be ignored.
And while Babe Ruth was becoming an American icon, there was another side of baseball that we cannot ignore. For many years, professional baseball in the United States was racially segregated. Black players were excluded from the white major leagues, even though many were extraordinary athletes. So, black players created their own teams and competitions. In 1920, the Negro National League was founded, and the Negro Leagues became home to incredible stars such as Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, and Cool Papa Bell. Then, baseball history changed forever. On April 15, 1947, Jackie Robinson played his first major league game for the Brooklyn Dodgers, breaking baseball's modern color barrier. Robinson faced racism and enormous pressure, but he proved that he belonged at the highest level. His impact went far beyond baseball, and soon more black stars entered the major leagues. Baseball was finally beginning to change.
And after Jackie Robinson, Major League Baseball began entering a new era. During the 1950s and 60s, stars like Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, Sandy Koufax, and Roberto Clemente became some of the biggest names in the sport. Baseball was also moving across the country. In 1958, the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, while the New York Giants moved to San Francisco. For the first time, Major League Baseball had truly reached the West Coast. Then came expansion. New teams appeared in cities that had never had Major League Baseball before. The sport was becoming larger and more national. At the same time, players from Latin America were becoming increasingly important. One of the greatest was Roberto Clemente from Puerto Rico. Clemente collected exactly 3,000 hits, won 12 Gold Gloves, and became an inspiration for generations of Latin American players. And this international influence was only beginning.
And this is where Major League Baseball truly becoming an international game. Latin American players had been part of professional baseball for many years, but their influence grew enormously during the second half of the 20th century. In 1956, Ozzie Virgil became the first Dominican-born player in Major League Baseball. He opened a door that would become incredibly important. Soon, stars like Juan Marichal showed the extraordinary talent coming from the Dominican Republic. Venezuela also developed a powerful baseball tradition, producing players such as Luis Aparicio, and later many more stars. Puerto Rico, Cuba, Mexico, and other countries continued adding their own great players. Over time, MLB teams invested more heavily in scouting and developing talent across Latin America, and the results transformed the sport. The Dominican Republic eventually became MLB's largest source of players born outside the United States. Baseball was no longer simply America's national pastime. It was becoming a global game. And soon, another major change would transform the lives of the players themselves. Free agency.
And free agency completely changed the relationship between players and teams. For many years, a rule called the reserve clause gave teams enormous control over their players. Even when a contract ended, a player could not simply choose another team. Then, outfielder Curt Flood challenged that system after being traded in 1969. Flood eventually lost his case in the Supreme Court, but his fight helped open the door for change. Then, in 1975, pitchers Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally challenged the reserve system. An arbitrator ruled in their favor, and baseball entered the modern era of free agency. Beginning in 1976, eligible players could finally negotiate with different teams and decide where they wanted to play. Salaries increased dramatically, and players gained much more control over their careers. Baseball had changed forever. But the following decades would bring even bigger stars, enormous records, and eventually one of the most controversial periods in MLB history.
Television brought games to millions of homes. Salaries continued to grow, and stars such as Cal Ripken Jr., Rickey Henderson, Nolan Ryan, and Ken Griffey Jr. became famous across the country. One extraordinary moment came in 1995. Cal Ripken Jr. played his 2,131st consecutive game, breaking Lou Gehrig's famous record. His streak eventually reached an incredible 2,632 games. But baseball had just experienced a serious crisis. A conflict between players and team owners caused the 1994 season to stop early. For the first time since 1904, there was no World Series. Fans were disappointed, and baseball needed to rebuild their trust. Then, during the late 1990s, home runs became a huge attraction. Stadiums were full again. Records were falling. But behind that excitement, a controversy was growing, and it would become one of the most difficult chapters in modern baseball history.
That controversial period became known as the steroid era. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, home runs reached incredible levels. In 1998, Mark McGwire and Dominican star Sammy Sosa created one of the most famous races in baseball history. Both were chasing Roger Maris's record of 61 home runs in one season. McGwire finished with 70. Sosa finished with 66. Then, in 2001, Barry Bonds went even further. He hit 73 home runs, setting a single-season record that still stands today. But eventually, serious questions appeared about the use of performance-enhancing drugs, especially steroids. Investigations connected many important players from this period with these substances, and MLB eventually introduced stronger testing programs. For many fans, this era remains complicated. The performances were unforgettable, but the controversy changed how people viewed some of baseball's greatest records. And while MLB was dealing with this difficult chapter, another transformation was beginning. Baseball was becoming more international than ever.
Baseball was becoming more international than ever. Players from the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Mexico, Japan, and many other places became major stars. Then, in 2006, baseball created a new international tournament, the World Baseball Classic. For the first time, many Major League stars could represent their countries in a global competition. Japan won the first tournament and later won again in 2009 and 2023. The Dominican Republic became champion in 2013, and the United States won in 2017. Then, in 2026, something historic happened. Venezuela won its first World Baseball Classic, defeating the United States 3-2 in the championship game. And MLB itself reflects this international growth. On opening day in 2026, 249 players born outside the United States represented 16 countries and territories. Baseball had started as an American tradition. Now it was truly a global sport.
And as baseball became more international, the game itself was also changing. Technology and data became increasingly important. For decades, fans looked at traditional numbers like batting average, home runs, and runs batted in. But teams began studying much more information. They wanted to understand exactly how players performed and why. Then, in 2015, MLB introduced StatCast in all 30 major league stadiums. Suddenly, baseball could measure things that were difficult to measure before. How fast did a pitch travel? How fast did the ball leave the bat? How quickly did a player run?
Technology was changing how teams evaluated players and how fans understood the game. Then, in 2023, MLB made another major change. A pitch timer was introduced, defensive shifts were limited, and the bases became larger. The goal was simple: make baseball faster, safer, and more active. The modern game was beginning to look very different. And, at the same time, a new generation of extraordinary players was arriving.
And this new generation has given baseball some remarkable stars. One of them is Aaron Judge, captain of the New York Yankees. In 2022, Judge hit 62 home runs, setting a new American League single-season record. Then, in 2025, he won his third American League MVP award, after leading Major League Baseball with a .331 batting average. But perhaps the most unusual player of this era is Shohei Ohtani from Japan. Ohtani can do something we almost never see at this level. He can be an elite hitter and an elite pitcher. That combination has made comparisons with Babe Ruth almost unavoidable. By 2026, Ohtani and Judge had become two of the biggest stars in baseball, while players such as Juan Soto, Bobby Witt Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Jose Ramirez represented the international talent of modern MLB. But modern baseball is not only changing because of its players. The rules themselves are changing too.
And in 2026, Major League Baseball introduced another historic change. For the first time in regular season MLB games, players can challenge certain ball and strike calls made by the home plate umpire. The technology is called the ABS challenge system. But this does not mean that computers have replaced umpires. The human umpire still makes the original call. If a batter, pitcher, or catcher believes that call is wrong, they can immediately request a challenge. Technology then tracks exactly where the pitch crossed the plate, and the result appears within seconds. Each team begins with 2 challenges, and successful challenges are capped. So now, even balls and strikes include a new element of strategy. It is a fascinating combination. A game with roots in the 19th century is now using modern technology to correct decisions in real time. And that perfectly represents Major League Baseball in 2026. The traditions remain, but the game continues to evolve.
And that brings us to Major League Baseball in 2026. More than a century has passed since the first modern World Series. The game has changed enormously. Today, MLB has 30 teams, players from many different countries, enormous modern stadiums, advanced technology, and fans around the world. Stars like Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge represent the modern game, while a new generation continues to appear. In 2026, Ohtani even became the leading National League vote-getter during the first phase of All-Star voting. Technology is changing baseball too. The new ABS challenge system now allows players to challenge some ball and strike decisions while keeping human umpires behind home plate. But after all these changes, the heart of baseball remains surprisingly familiar. A pitcher throws the ball. A batter tries to hit it. And anything can happen. From the early professional teams of the 1800s to Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, international stars, and today's technological era, baseball has continued to evolve. And maybe that is what makes its story so fascinating. The rules can change. The players can change. The technology can change. But the game continues. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the history of Major League Baseball. Keep listening, keep learning, and stay curious.